Welcome in, everybody, to the Lastella Report. Robbie Lastella here. We are back post March Madness. College basketball season is over, but wanted to come to you one last time. Joined by the Bracketeer crew. If you've been following my coverage from the past couple of weeks, you've either seen me retweeting Rocco's stuff out west, Ivetta's content with me out in Atlanta. We've got both of them here to break down everything from the past couple of weeks, as well talk a little bit about the offseason coming up. Still a lot to talk about with the offseason, but we can only talk about so much. But Rocco, Ivetta, guys, how's it going?
It's going great, Robbie. Thanks for having us today. Looking forward to breaking it all down with you. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be home. I've been on the road since the AAC tournament with by myself in Providence, then in Atlanta with Ivetta Team Bracketeer East, and then all together coverage in San Antonio. We had it unlocked. So I'm back at home though. My dog's happy. But Ivetta, how's it going?
Hey, Robbie, thanks so much for having us. I echo that sentiment. I've been on the road since there's first and second round. So since the tournament started on March uh, 18th or whatever that was. So I too am happy to be home and reset and just kind of take it easy for a while.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were. I was bouncing between the media stuff and a couple of the coaches' events. Uh, I think you both went to the coaches' events though as well. What would you guys say out in San Antonio? Is there anything that stood out? I know Will Wade gave a presentation out there that was a hit. I don't know if either of you went to that one, but was there anything that stood out from the coaches' perspective, the coaches' meetings perspective? Before we dive into the games itself.
Well, yeah, Robbie, I would say, I guess three different events stood out. Like there was so much going on and tried to get to as many things as possible just to connect. I go out there mainly for launching into scheduling for next year, really just building the connections or maintaining existing connections. We've been averaging between 60, I think last year we had 67 new coaches in Division One, and I'm doing scheduling across all 31 leagues. So it really helps establish that process. But I think another reason why I'm involved with that is it helps set the tone for next season's previews. You learn so much about the teams, about why teams will play each other, why they won't play each other. Transfer portal is so fluid. So I need to stay in contact with all of those coaches, plus any ones that I didn't meet. There's several more that I didn't meet than I did meet. From that point all the way until probably there'll still be teams looking for games, if you can believe it, in October. With all that being said, I think the week really got rolling on Thursday. I thought the event that Intersport, who does a lot of different college basketball events, put on was terrific. They kind of had an upstairs, downstairs situation at I think it was the Skybox Sports Bar, and there was a nice collection of both, prominent media, ESPN, CBS, my colleagues on Field of 68, etc., as well as just a really good collection of coaches, some friends in the business, some people to meet. So that ended up being a really good time on Thursday. And then I think Friday was just full of a bunch of back to backs. The one that JUCO put on was great. Connected again with some close friends. I know that we all know the Queens coach Grant Leonard. He was entertaining us for a while, but I also met like staff from Kansas City, different teams in like the Horizon League and Southland, and you name it. So that was good. And then I think the last but certainly not least is while you guys are working the Final Four, I'm at coaches' social hours, which can be a ton of fun. And I went to one for game one and a second for game two. So anyway, without getting into too much of the weeds, connected with a ton more throughout Saturday. So for me in those 3 days, it was a ton of nonstop networking, and I know both of you were in and out for all of that.
For sure, and I think I think that's kind of what people don't realize is the Final Four is not just the basketball game, but it's everything that goes on outside of that. I think every coach in the country is there. Ivetta, did you go to the Mike? Did Mike? Magpio, did he speak at one of those events? Was that when I saw new Fordham head coach? Was that one of the events?
Yeah, so he did the Asian Coaches Association reception, and then he gave a talk, and I went to his talk, and it was awesome. I love all the X's and O stuff, so I love to learn. And he gave a great talk on hustle stats and the whole and the Kyle Smith coaching tree and their program that they follow. And it was awesome because one of those teams actually won the national championship. So it was really neat being there and just getting to learn about their system and the coaches that use the system. And they call it Smart Wins, and it's absolutely fascinating. So I definitely recommend that for, if you hear him talk about it. But yeah, there were some really good coaching clinics, some great talks. I definitely want to do a little more of that next year. But just echoing what Rocco was saying, there were so many good events between like receptions, socials. The intersport event was really good too, even though that ended up being more of a media attended event. And I will say, I think there were more people at the JUCO social than at Pitbull down the road, and they had to stop letting people into Pitbull because they were at capacity. So that shows you just how packed some of these events were, and it's interesting because you know it's a time for coaches and media and everybody to kind of enjoy the season and share just share things about the season and it's but coaches are taking recruiting calls over the weekend, which is crazy because they used to have at least a little bit of downtime before uh, recruiting season gets into full swing, and they have to do camps and foreign tours and all these things. But those days are gone. It's pretty much a 365 uh, days a year on duty now. So yeah, so it's definitely a wild ride. If you haven't done the Final Four, for anybody out there, highly recommended. Fantastic event, just all around.
Yeah, you got to go out there for people. Like I said, if you think it's just basketball, there's a million other things going out there. Good for the city of San Antonio as well. I know a couple of the UTSA beat reporters were saying that they need to get that back there. Is good for everything from the economy to trying to get them a potential NFL team one day. So, but in terms of the games themselves, Auburn versus Florida. Auburn looked to be good there in the first half, and then Florida did what they do. We'll talk about Florida here in a second, but in terms of Auburn, do we think that Bruce Pearl has turned them into a consistent contender going forward? Is this a team that we're going to be talking about for the Final Four every year?
For me,
Yeah, go for
it. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, certainly a contender, no doubt. I mean, he's built that thing up to an amazing level. I don't think people from Auburn or the SEC could have ever envisioned this way back when Bruce got the job. Both of you were in Atlanta and saw firsthand just kind of how crazy things have gotten in terms of the passion for attending games, building this Auburn basketball culture, the characters that they bring into the program. They have a tight knit family behind the doors where sometimes crazy things happen, but they don't care. They thrive on certain situations, and obviously they're extremely athletic. They have different levels of pros. We see what they've done in the portal already adding Abdul Bashir, arguably one of the most individually skilled players in the portal from a non-power program, just did everything for Monmouth last year. He's also 6'7" and an absolute monster. He'll be great at this level, at the SEC level, I think. Keyshawn Hall was at UCF last year, so he's already proven it at a power level. So, and I do believe Chad Baker Mazzara, it's not official yet, but I do think he'll be back. So between those three guys and just, they're going to work the portal. They have great resources, just like the rest of the league. They have a great staff. I don't think they're going anywhere. Now, of course, having the player of the year in Broome, a guy that could single-handedly dominate a lot of nights. That's going to be tough to replace. But whether they're a 1 seed or not, that's a different discussion. But I think they're going to be in the mix for not only making the tournament, but making a deep run in the tournament next year. And I think that's the standard, and it's been the standard since the last time they got to the Final Four.
Yeah, you mentioned Chad Baker Mazzara. I feel like if he comes back, he's going to get a lot of haters. But good for him. He had a couple down years early in his career where he got hurt, and obviously he started in JUCO, so he's kind of getting those years back, whether some people like it or not. So we'll probably he's still he's definitely an interesting person to talk to, though. If you ever see an interview with him, definitely check that out. But the other unfortunate loser from the Final Four was Duke. To nobody's expectation, Duke alumni, I don't think could believe it. I don't think the Duke student section could believe it. But Houston came back and stunned them. Ivetta, Rocco, whoever wants to take it. Do we think this Duke team is the most talented team ever not to win the title?
That's a great question, Robbie. But perhaps. But how do you gauge talent, right? I have to tread lightly here because the ACC was down this year, so it's kind of hard to. It's really hard to say, whether they're the most. They were definitely extremely talented. Obviously, there was some. I would say some questionable coaching decisions made in the second half there. Um, it's they're not going anywhere. They'll be back. They're not going to have Cooper Flag, but they'll be back. They'll be able to rebuild that roster. And then the other thing too, I want to add on to what Rocco was saying about Auburn, because as you know, Robbie, we got kind of emotionally attached to this Auburn team, spending so much time with them. And, Bruce Pearl is he's just such a proven winner. He's the second fastest coach to reach 300 wins after Roy Williams in the NCAA. I still think Auburn could have won the championship. They were running 7 guys. I think their depth is what ultimately ended up hurting them. They're running 7 guys. So I think in the second half, fatigue just started to set in. So they didn't really, there are some things they didn't execute well offensively. And I think Florida's defense took advantage of that. And it shows because I think Auburn had 12 turnovers in the second half, if I remember correctly. So I think that's kind of the beauty of the of this Final Four this year. I know a lot of people had a lot to say about it, but all 3 Final Four games were decided down the stretch, which is an absolutely beautiful thing. And I think on any given Sunday, if you will, any of those 4 teams could have won the championship. So Auburn, I think Auburn was talented enough. I think Duke was talented enough as well. I think the reason that that Duke is kind of getting that rap of, I think it's just the expectations because so many people were expecting them to win it all. I think that's why they're kind of, being coined as the best team that didn't win it. But in reality, we don't really know if that's the case until it's played out on the court.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say to your original question, Robbie, those are great points about that, there's 2 kind of ways to answer it, right? So in the Ken Palm era, I think it's the common college basketball person's default system, started in 97. So it's a good amount of years, but not like the end all be all of college basketball. In that era, they're one of the best teams, clearly, by the numbers. However, if the question is most talented, that there's a good argument for that based on the KenPom data, et cetera. But the reality is the 3 other teams at the Final Four were not that much below them, even when you go off an analytical model like that. They also have had flaws in the close games. Like when they lost early in the year to both Kentucky and Kansas, those were late game situations that cost them the game. When they lost to Clemson in Little John Coliseum in February, that game was tight until the last minute when Clemson closed them out down the stretch, and we all know what happened in San Antonio. So almost every other game besides those four, there are only 4 losses, they blew the other team out. Besides the one really gritty win over Auburn, that was a home game. So from that standpoint, definitely not the most dominant team ever. We've seen plenty of others. And I think also the question should be like, was this team clearly above the second best team? Answer is yes, but the gap wasn't that large. You can go back to Phi Slamma Jamma in '83 being by far the best team in college basketball. Nobody even could come close. 2 NBA Hall of Famers on that team. The '85 upset of Villanova over Georgetown, one of the all-time greatest upsets, arguably the greatest upset in college basketball history. And then, of course, the 91 UNLV team who had that amazing starting 5 with Grandma Ma, Stacey Ogman, Liddell Eccles, Greg Anthony, Anderson Hunt, getting upset and shocked by Duke. I think back in the day, they barely had point spreads, but if they did, they were favored by something like 22 in the Final Four and lost. So by those measures, not even close.
There was definitely point spreads back then. They just kept them, in the basement.
Kept them a little secret. Yep.
Yeah, they had the bookies rolling heavy back in the day, but now it's celebrated. Now tell those people what betting is like nowadays, and they'll have a heart attack. But in terms of the natty itself, Rocco, you've been a Todd Golden follower for quite some time now, from his time from San Francisco to early years in Florida, I guess early year 2, and now here we are in year 3, and here he is a national champion. Did you think he'd be able to win a national championship that quickly, get to one that quickly while you were covering him at USF?
No, I mean there was no. That'd be unfair, honestly. And I would just say, for him, it was an awesome job, behind the scenes to land at Florida. That off season when San Francisco made the tournament, and I'll say like that was really impressive for them to get in that large bid. They've only gotten one at large bid in the last 43 years. It's still that team. These last couple teams have been really good, but not quite there. So he's historic here in the Bay Area due to that season. Well, behind the scenes that week, he had already interviewed at Missouri. There was a total of 6 SEC jobs available, and I think most had interest. But his agent and the team behind the scenes worked really hard because they knew Florida was the chance where you really have a chance to win the national championship if you do it right. And I think because you both understand, like if your program's won the national championship before or been to multiple Final Fours, things of that nature, it's a lot easier to go back and repeat that somewhat formula for success. Whether you run the team the same or not, that's not really what I mean by that. It means the fan expectations, the investments from donors, all those little things that it takes to build an elite program can be retapped into if you get the right guy. And so, that for first of all, him just getting the job instead of going to a place like Missouri or a Mississippi State was a huge difference, even to South Carolina. So he gets the big job. And then in year 1, he's just trying to learn the league a little bit more. He had coached 1 year under Bruce Pearl, and I think that's what made him really know he wanted to be in the SEC. But him going through that first year was not necessarily what he expected. They knew they missed a little bit on the portal. They took a couple undersized guys that would have worked really well at San Francisco. You just can't do that in the SEC, and he had to learn the hard way. I was at multiple practices in the first year, and the big thing he kept talking about was we have to get tougher. We have to get tougher. So it's more about the character of the guys. He was able to retain Colin Castleton, of course, an all-league level player, but besides him, they didn't have enough around him. So they worked really hard into the second-year roster, which of course did get them to the tournament, which really had to happen because the pressure, as you know, in Gainesville, you miss 2 straight tournaments as a new coach, could be really brutal. The message boards were already pretty brutal by that point anyway. But getting to the tournament, I think, was good enough. Obviously, didn't want to lose to Colorado. That was a crazy game. They scored 100 and lost. But at least, they got to a better level, and they were able to bring a lot of those players back. I know originally, like Clayton came from Iona, Richard from Belmont. Chinyelu came this year from Washington State. Of course, Elijah this year from FAU. But Condon had already been there a year, so it was year 2 for him. And Tommy Ha had been around. Hanlockton had been there from Marshall for 2 years. So they really felt good about the mix of guys and the increased level of toughness. And I think, nobody could have predicted, especially preseason. I think preseason they were like 30th or something. I think I had them on Bracketeer.org as a preseason 8 seed. So it's not surprising they made it back to the tournament. But to go from those expectations to then, making that huge leap, going undefeated in the non-conference, going to Auburn and winning, later going to Alabama and winning, getting 2 of the best road wins anybody had in the country. I think that gave them a ton of confidence. And I think what we saw, and I know you'll have other questions, but what we saw in the tournament was just how unflappable they were in the most important moments. And as Ivetta mentioned earlier, with these teams playing such close games, when we finally got to that stage, that those little margins made all the difference in the world for the Gators.
It did, and now that thinking back on it, what a crazy coaching duo between Dennis Gates and Golden, both being under consideration for Missouri. That shout out their AD. I mean, they did a good job with that search. It worked out. I mean, that's what you get when you don't want to try to. You don't need guys who have super high major. You can get a mid major grinder and have success with them. And look what happened. So, but. Looking at the guards that you mentioned Elijah Martin, Walter Clayton. That guard pairing to me was better than a lot of teams had. I mean, obviously Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple are crazy, but just the way that Elijah and Walter Clayton played off each other. Walter was the one hitting a lot of the clutch buckets at times, but Elijah was hitting steady free throws down the stretch in that national championship. Ivetta, have you kind of heard of or seen in your time as a college basketball follower a guard duo like that, or is that one in recent memory top for you?
I think, first of all, Robbie, thank you for mentioning the fact that this was an essentially an all mid-major team, which is really cool. That they just didn't they again, like, they don't have the biggest NIL, but these guys did it because they're all very talented. They were developed, and they know how to win. And so it's one of those things where certain programs, they're just they may never be in the top 10, and how much they're paying their players, but that doesn't mean they can't make it to the championship. So I absolutely love the fact that the way that they compose that roster, and that they got all of these mid-major players that got. I mean, it's just absolutely a beautiful thing. And I do think clutch is the key word here, but it's kind of an oxymoron, because the crazy thing about Elijah and Walter Clayton Jr. is that they did it consistently. So when you're clutch consistently, can you use the term clutch at that point? You're just consistently good in late game situations, So, and that just speaks to their depth. It helps a lot to be deep at the guard position to make a deep run in the tournament. And look at FAU again, and I mean, look at the FAU players that made it deep in the tournament. That just speaks to, again, that combination of guards. It's just incredible. And it's just and look at other championship game teams from the past. It's just such an effective formula. So, it's nice to have one clutch guy. So take Caleb Love, for example. But when you have the depth where any of those guys can step up, because that's the key here, right? You can't rely on one guy, because that one guy can have a bad game. And even in the championship game, although Elijah and Walter Clayton Jr. were instrumental, Will Richard was the guy that carried the team. So
First half too.
exactly. So that, I think that depth at the guard
Yeah.
position is what's what's really great here, and there are different recipes for building a tournament caliber program. Look at Michigan. Michigan comes to mind. With the two bigs. Everybody, kind of has their own style, but I think Florida found the right pieces to fit their system, and yeah, I mean, I think it's just we saw it from the beginning of the season when Walter Clayton Jr. I mean, Florida has always been a second half team. We saw them go on these runs in the second half from the very beginning, even back in non-conference play, and they just look absolutely unstoppable. They just see these opportunities and then they just go for it. So yeah, it makes for a great watch for sure.
And you mentioned that the second half comebacks and all that. Rocco, you were that with them when they beat Texas Tech, and so did they ever look frazzled to you, or is that just was this team the perfect combination of good coaching, veteran guards, and everything you want in a team that's going to compete and win a national championship?
Players, no, and that's the most impressive part to me. Coaches, yes, and we're all friends, so it's fine. I can say that, but yeah, I mean, I just that was the thing that impressed me the most is that the players just continued to stay the course and believe. If you've seen any of Todd's quotes out there, Todd Golden's quotes out there, he's always saying "stay the course." That's an original Randy Bennett line from 3 decades ago that's never gone away. But that's really what they preach. And like the players now, you probably heard them say "stay the course." They're always believing in each other. I think for this particular journey, it started in their first real tight game in November, or it was actually in December in Charlotte. They played North Carolina. I think they were down 4 at the final media, and there was just this like belief. Like I think coaches even admitted from that night they were a little concerned about the situation, like how they're going to handle the moment, etc. And the players just were unflappable. They're like, "Let's go get this W. Like we'll figure out a way to get it done." And when I watched the Texas Tech game unfold, of course, they're down 9, and it's a combination of both players and coaches in that moment, which makes me, kind of amazed about the entire program because they're using defensive analytics to generate more possessions, to use the math in their favor. So they fouled JT Toppin basically intentionally, who's I think low 60%er, and it's a 1-and-1. They're not in the double bonus yet, so that's part of the genius behind that. In that situation, you want to a lot of teams will start extending the game with about a minute left, maybe a minute and a half, when it's kind of clear that you're in desperation mode. But Florida, in this example, and they've done it in other games, whether it's at Florida or San Francisco, or even our guy Meg Pio and other people in the Kyle Smith family, like to look at it similar way. Like, why start your comeback so late when you have so much time still to work with? So they did that at 2:59 left. Of course, he misses. Florida comes down, hits a 3, boom, down 6. Next possession, they're still in the single bonus. End up fouling Darian Williams, which I don't think was the right guy to foul, but they lucked out. He was 83%, misses the first again. So now Texas Tech just blows 2 possessions. Florida comes down, hits a 3 again. And within about 20 seconds in real game time, there's still 2.5 minutes to go, and now they're down 3, right? Most teams in that situation, they let it play out, and they might still be down 9 with a minute and a half to go instead of Florida's example where they cut it to 3. So that is all credit to the coaches and the entire defensive analytics of fouling or not fouling. But the rest of it is when Walter Clayton had the ball in those clutch situations at the Chase Center, he never wavered. He would always I could always see him with his eyes looking up at the clock, understanding, up 3, tied, down 3, whatever it may be, and just making the right decisions. Texas Tech had some really good coaching in terms of their strategy to double him, which is why Thomas Howe had to hit 2 huge threes. But they were open threes because Walter drew the double team, found Thomas in the screen game, and then he did his job and delivered and made a 3. He's a great player too. So I think that's the coolest thing about this Florida team is whoever the forgotten man is can really bury you. And so Ivetta's example of the national championship game, that was Will Richard. That whole first half kind of kept him alive because Houston's defense was all over Walter Clayton. So, and we saw them come back in the UConn game with a kind of a different formula, but same type of moments where they really had to stay the course and overcome. There was moments in that UConn game, second round, where they were in deep trouble.
Yeah. And you look at the way this Florida team had to run through this. They didn't have an easy NCAA tournament schedule. I mean, even old Rob Jones at Norfolk State wanted to give him a game. They weren't ready to just lie down. So
That's right.
every team, and then obviously after that, the competition really started to step up with UConn, Texas Tech, and Auburn, and then you got
Every
obviously
game, yeah. They were
and then
down. I think they're the first national champion to be down by 9 or more in each of the last 3 games
it's
ever.
an impressive run, and so you really got to respect it. You can't there shall be no Mickey Mouse allegations this year. I think we can all agree Florida earned it, and they played in the SEC just to make it even better for those who love to talk about the SEC. But in terms of the losers a little bit, obviously tough run there. Down the stretch for Houston, but to get to that game is very impressive. But I feel like it's not like Kelvin Sampson's got a ton of years left doing this. At least, that's what it seems like with the way he has his son waiting in arms and whatnot. So obviously, that's one he would want to get back. But do we think they just added Pop Isaacs for either whoever wants to take it? Do we think they potentially could run this back next year and find themselves back in a Final Four, Sweet 16, second weekend type of deal? Rocco, you bet it.
Yeah, I'll jump on it. That's it. I'm a little leery. I'm not the highest on Isaacs. Now, I do love the way Houston plays. Their program is at a point right now to where they can plug and play guys that I might necessarily be the highest on, and they're still going to win because of their style. Absolutely thump people. I think the one to watch is Terrence Arsenault. That's a guy I was really high on having a big year next year. He hit the portal yesterday. So he's obviously probably getting plugged by one of these teams with massive budgets. So losing him would hurt. But I think Tugler's back, who's extremely physical. You have Emmanuel Sharp slated to be back. Isaacs obviously can do it. He's got skill. I'm not saying he doesn't have skill. I just don't trust him in some of those late game situations. But I think like most Houston teams of the past several years, majority of their games, they're going to pound people. So there's a big margin there to where they should finish near or at the top of the Big 12. I mean, their floor right now is probably like a 4 or a 5 seed. And that would almost be like probably looked at as a bad year based on what they've been doing. But I mean, yeah, like they're fine overall. I just don't think I see some things out there where they're number one. I don't necessarily agree with that.
No, we'll have to see, but it's interesting to see that they do have the coach in waiting in Kellen Sampson,
Yeah.
and I mean that with the way that I was going to say Kelvin Sampson has kind of rebuilt this whole thing in Houston. I saw videos and pictures of 2000 early 2000s to early 2010s where it was dark in there and then just not a good vibe, and they've rebuilt that whole thing up. And so for them to have a chance to continue that, I think is awesome. I mean, he joked about it. He said, I wouldn't be here without nepotism. But sometimes, when you do it right, nepotism doesn't have to be a bad thing. So
That's
um,
interesting.
it is. It is. And so, kind of moving away from the Final Four in complete gears and talking about something that we all like, mid-major headlines. We had two big coaching departures over the past couple of days. Lenny Acuff leaving Lipscomb to go to Samford, and then Alan Huss going to Creighton to be the next coach in waiting there, leaving High Point. To me, it seems like the path to instant success is going to be tough for Lipscomb unless they get a home run hire or something. But I feel like with the resources that High Point has, really, and as long as they don't get somebody who's a horrible coach, they've got a chance to do that. Ivetta, you're the mid-major aficionado here. Do we think High Point, if they make the right hire, are they going to be back in the mix things down there again next year?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've proven that they're pretty much a going to be a perennial powerhouse here. So they've got the funds that a lot of mid majors don't, and not just for coaches but for players as well. So I'm very very curious to see who they end up with. And yeah, I think they're used to winning. They're now that they've tasted the top there. So yeah, so I'm excited to see where this High Point program ends up. But yes, I do think that they will return to the top. Might not be next year, but I think eventually they will if they make the right hire, like you said.
Yeah. And you look at Lipscomb, I mean, Lenny Akoff had them rolling, and he's off to Samford. I think that's to replace Bucky McMillan with Lenny Akoff. I don't think that's. I mean, obviously it'll be a different style of things, but in terms of coaches that'll lead you to success, I don't think there's much of a drop off there. Rocco, what do we think that? What do we think about Samford and Lipscomb?
Oh, I think it's great because if you follow Lenny's career, he took the Lipscomb job when they were down in going into 2019-20 season. Of course, then that ends with no tournament for the national scene. But he was just starting to rebuild Lipscomb at that point. But he came from a highly successful, I think, 2-decade run at Alabama Alabama Huntsville. So he's from. I mean, that's not far from Birmingham at all. So for him to be able to come back to Alabama and do it at a place like Samford, which already is one of the better resource SoCon schools, obviously just had a heck of a year, not this year, but the year before, probably should have beat Kansas in the first round. He's gonna crush it there. Honestly, it's a perfect fit for everybody, both for Acuff and for Samford. He can, of course, get taken care of himself a little bit better at Samford than at Lips. And if I'm Lipscomb, I'm doing too many abbreviations here. But if I'm Lipscomb, I would do I would do what they did before. They got Lenny Acuff from the Division II ranks. The transfer portal's already been going and going and going. So I think if you're in their situation, the best thing you can do is weed through the best of the Division II options. And if you're having a hard time breaking the tie, go with a guy that's got 2 or 3 really good players with eligibility, because then you're not just hiring a good coach. You're hiring a good coach that's going to bring 2 or 3 starters to you and an opportunity to succeed right away. I mean, right now we saw the A-Sun this year. It was very much up for grabs, but Lipscomb and North Alabama a cut above the rest. But I think you can stay in the mix for a league championship there with the right hire, where you can get a couple really good players with that. Now, I don't know D2 like the back of my hand at this point. I don't know if I ever will, but I imagine there's some options there to look through and to interview some guys that can bring that to the table that deserve the opportunity. We just saw that in the Big West with Cal Poly. Mike DeGeorge was basically a miniature Ben McCollum. Everybody, I think, at this point knows Ben McCollum, what he did at Drake. That's kind of the most extreme example because he won multiple national championships in D2. But even like a Mike DeGeorge, who did a really good job at Colorado Mesa College, bringing 3 starters to Cal Poly. So they dealt with injuries all year, but by the end of the year, they were one of the hottest teams in all of mid-major basketball, making a surprising run just to qualify for the Big West tournament. Then, of course, getting to the semifinals, knocking off really good teams in UC Davis and Santa Barbara, I believe, to get there was beyond impressive. And then you saw it also the year before in the Big West, where Cal State Northridge hired Andy Newman. And now this year, in year 2, they're already in the top 100 of KenPom, or they were at certain points this year. I think no matter kind of where you look, a lot of these D2 formulas to D1 are working, and Lipscomb's not as well resourced as some of the other teams in that league. So it's a way for the school to save a little bit money on the hire, and you're going to get somebody who knows how to work, because in D2 you have to work.
100%. And I'm the coaching search season never stops. But last thing here on the mid majors before we wrap it up. Are we concerned? Final consensus here after the season has officially ended, tournament is over. Are we concerned next year that it's going to be the same thing, and that by the second weekend Mid majors will not be in the NCAA tournament. I'll go first to our aficionado Ivetta on that. What do you think, Ivetta?
I am concerned. I am deeply concerned because we do not have a plan in place. And the more time that goes by, the more concerning it gets. Because the reason, as we all know, the reason that the NCAA tournament is the best postseason in all of sports is because of the level playing field. So when you take away the level playing field, it becomes a completely different sport. And, there's been talks of maybe enforcing a 1 or 2 year guaranteed contract, then let schools buy players out, implementing a finder's fee, which I think is interesting, where you give New Mexico $500,000 for finding and developing, discovering and developing Donovan Dent, for example. I don't know what the solution is, but I know we need a solution because as of right now, it seems like they're going to restructure the league where we have 364 teams, and most of them are going to become a farm league for the powers. And we're already seeing teams, I think we're going to see more of what we saw with St. Francis as far as, teams leaving and stepping down to the D2, D3 levels just because they can't compete. And it's just sad because these are great programs with great histories. And not just that, but it also takes a lot of that magic away, right? We're just going to have a tournament full of power conference teams and and maybe some of the power mid majors, like the Daytons or the of the world. But and I also I like to also piggyback off of what Rocco was saying too about the JUCO direction because I've seen a lot of that as well. So we are seeing, I think, with the new JUCO rule being implemented, with the new eligibility rules, with them being able to play or having eligibility for 4 years. Not only are we going to see more JUCO players, but we're also going to see more JUCO coaches coming up in the ranks, which I think is a great thing. But how do we juggle that? Yeah, so I think that somebody needs to step up, whether it's the NCAA or, collectives or somebody. And I think we just need to decide on a direction because as of right now, it's just the Wild West, and people are just getting fatigued with just, it's just a free for all. So I'm hoping that something changes this season, but we'll see.
We shall see, indeed. Yeah, I don't know. As a mid-major guy, I'm hopefully optimistic that I was talking to Rocco before. Like, look at Tulane in the AAC. They've got Rowan Brumbaugh and Greg Glenn, two of their best players, coming back next year. So maybe somewhere out there, there's teams that are building things up and maybe could potentially make some noise next year as well. So we'll see. We'll see. Rocco, from a scheduling department, how this offseason, I know you get involved with that, but is that going to be getting even more difficult for the mid major ranks as well?
Yeah, every year gets tougher. I think because there's more and more rewards. Yeah, I think it all starts with the NCAA tournament, right? Like we had 37 at-large bids this year, and the almost all of them went to either power school or Mountain West did get a total of four in the tournament. But you had A10 and American where you are, Robbie, getting one team in. It's just like those schools are very invested in basketball. So to have that many teams, only one get in. We out here in the West, we had a historic year, best Big West in at least 20 years. And the second team, Irvine, who I thought could very much be competitive in this tournament, didn't even get a sniff. So it's all very frustrating. We do have the WCC, of course, gets the two every year with St. Mary's and Gonzaga, but even those two did not get seeded very well based on what they were hoping for or expecting. 7 and an 8, which made it tough on both of them to not get past the first weekend. Of course, Gonzaga having to play Houston, played them really tough, but fell. And St. Mary's just couldn't make a shot against Alabama. brutal draws for both. So even in those two examples where we think those two programs are in a really good spot, like it's getting scary. And so yeah, then when you go to scheduling, you start that whole process. At least I do with the MTE scene, and we're now seeing like if you're not in the players era, which is now going to be 20 teams, perhaps more. Um, it's it's not like before. The 8-team tournaments are going away. Maui and Atlantis will still do it next year, but those fields are very watered down. You probably saw yesterday. I think John Rothstein put out there the 8 teams slated for the Atlantis, and 2 of them are from the American with South Florida and Wichita State. It's not the same tournament. And then everybody from there is affected. And whether, ESPN's going to hang on to Charleston and Disney and some of the others, but they're all going to be 4-team fields. And what happens is if you get an SEC team, we'll just use Mississippi State, for example. If Mississippi State calls ESPN, they're going to give them specific instructions. We only want 4 Power Fours or we're out. So all these different opportunities that used to even just kind of randomly come to you, like if you were FAU even last year playing in Charleston where you had 3 games where you could have played up to 3 Power Fives, even that's going away now. Of course, it's already been a problem for several years for just doing any kind of series with high majors or getting them into a neutral event. You have to have like a projected top 25 level team like Memphis or Gonzaga. They're really kind of the only 2 operating at that level annually to get the opportunities. So those 2 will continue, but for everybody else, that's where I come into play. We're basically just pairing them so we can get the best possible opportunities, but they don't have a chance to beat a top 10 or in most cases a top 20 team. So that continues to shrink. And again, it's all related to your previous question that you had with Ivetta to where, like, what do we do? It's really starting to feel more and more like the FBS and the FCS has come to college basketball.
Hopefully not, but we shall see. We'll keep our eye on that over the offseason. I know the house deal and whatnot is supposed to change things a little bit, give some sort of structure. We'll see how much that affects, if anything, or if it just makes things worse. Anytime the courts have gotten involved, things have gotten worse. So, but that's always an option too. Don't get too hopeful yet. But winding down here, obviously, everything is a total unknown at this point. But as we head into the offseason, is there any favorite that you guys have? I know for me right now, if I got 2 ifs, if Florida can get Xavier Lee to replace Walter Clayton, I like them to get back into the Final Four. But if Michigan is also able to get Yaxel Lendenberg and not let him go to the NBA, I like Michigan to potentially make a run this year and get past the Sweet 16. They were unable to this year. I know Dusty will be wanting to get back there and move on. So those are my 2, I guess you can say favorites, ifs, whatever you want to call it. But who do you guys got?
I agree with you on Michigan. I would be absolutely shocked if they didn't at least make it to the Sweet 16. They acquired 3 of the top 6 players in the portal, and they rebuilt the backcourt. But then they got Ade Mara, Morris Johnson, and Yaxel Lendenborg in the front court. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to watch this Michigan team. I think they're going to be well coached. Hopefully, they gel well together. I think. I think that they're going to be an exciting team. And I have another kind of a dark horse, if you will. And I think that's UCLA. I'm really interested to see if they can actually get over the hump. Obviously, the acquisition of Donovan Dent is going to be huge. And then they've got Sky Clark, Eric Daly Jr., Bill Ado, those guys are returning. And second-year transfers are in today's landscape the new fourth-year seniors. So I think if they can make it work in Cronin's system. I think that they can go far as well. I went to that game, their game against UNC this year at Madison Square Garden. UNC's only quad one win, and it was, I mean, it was electric. You know, I know UCLA had stumbled. Um, it's several, you know, not just down the stretch, but at several times throughout the season they stumbled against better competition. But I think that they just need a couple more pieces. They just need a little bit more time, and I think that they um, could potentially make a run as well. But I really, really, I am 100% with you on that Michigan team. As far as the ones that I'm kind of the most excited about.
Rocco, anything different?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't I missed the word favorites because I was going with some teams I think with huge upside, but I would not put any limitation on either of these two.
Fair
So I
enough.
think the first one's kind of evolving to be obvious, but it is BYU. Of course, with DeBansta, the best player, basically next year's Cooper Flag, but a much different player. Just going to give them a spike of something BYU's never had. The best player on the floor, pretty much in every game. And there's rumors where Darian Williams, who was probably the most impressive player in the West region, could land there. I know he's looking at Washington. He's looking at BYU. Doesn't look like he'll be back at Texas Tech. So if they land him, I mean, BYU could arguably be number one. Of course, they landed Robert Wright here officially yesterday, giving him three. They seem to have endless resources. They already have an amazing roster returning, and you add just a bunch of primetime players. They could just be way too good to beat, especially in most of their games. Now it comes down to this coaching staff's only going to be in year two. How well are they going to mesh together? Are egos going to be involved, or is the Latter Day Saints church environment just going to keep everybody kumbaya all year long? But the talent is going to be crazy at BYU. And then the other one I absolutely love and I feel like is very solid, and I'm just curious how far they're going to take it, is the Iowa Hawkeyes essentially basically bringing everybody from Drake over. Ben McCollum doesn't lose, and they have some money to spend now to add. They've already added a really good portal. Somebody, I think Evan Mia has them top 10 portal, good enough for me. But the portal's not done by any means. We have a long way to go. There's going to be more guys that enter, and they've got some resources to go get some real pop to go around Bennett Sturts. That team's going to win a lot of games next year. It might be my sleeper pick to win the Big Ten. And then I guess the third one is a team that might seem obvious, but I think a lot of people overlooking so far in the next year is Alabama. I just
Mm.
know when Nate Oates made the Final Four last year, missed this year, that staff is such a good staff. Murphy's going to stay one more year. He'll be a head coach soon, but they'll build a roster, and I think they'll work even harder. And I think the SEC is pretty wide open next year, and whoever can emerge at the top, like Auburn did this year, and then Florida, of course, too, will be right there. So you got to pick if you're looking for like an upside team, you got to do some research on the SEC. I think Alabama's a good place to start. Tennessee will be strong again. Gillespie's already committed. But yeah, definitely looking at BYU, Iowa, and Alabama for next year.
I like BYU for sure. I think everyone wants to talk about the money. They got a really good coaching staff as well. I think you mentioned so.
Yeah.
That's a team to watch for sure. But guys, winding down here. Any final thoughts? I know Rocco. It's a big off season for Bracketeer coming up. Did I hear right?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to thank you both for all the work you helped with throughout the year. Robbie, you were all over the place, 3 straight weekends, starting in Providence. So appreciate that too, especially, and hopefully it was good for you. I also just say for anybody watching, we do have a support button on the website. I don't ever advertise it, got to get better at that. But if you do want to continue to support the work we're doing, it's much more than just bracket forecasting. Obviously, we have live reporters, photojournalists at the games throughout the season. But during the offseason, I've also built out a full consulting business that really helps get the information and the games that hopefully you want to see as fans put together, or at least get you the information first. So kind of everything going on Bracketeer happens 365 days a year. It's a full-fledged operation now. Really proud of what we've built so far, but there's the future is much, much brighter. So if you want to throw $5, $500, $5,000, I won't stop you. But there's a support button there at the top of the website, and appreciate everything everybody's done so far. I can't wait to see what's coming next.
Big off season ahead for Rocco. Big off season ahead for all of us. We'll be either crying at the transfer portal or excited at the transfer portal. That's the beauty of it. Stay tuned to all of our social medias, respectively, and we'll be back. You might see us here on the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network again, talking some hoops here sometime soon. But folks, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Lastella Report. For Rocco Miller and Ivetta Abramyan, I'm Robbie Lastella, and we'll see you guys next time.